Now, it's not really a big surprise given that Disney, such as the Bob Iger situation and everything happening with the board of directors, are having ongoing issues and drama surrounding Snow White 2024 based on what happened with the leaked photographs of the 7 dwarfs that actually released online a couple of weeks ago. That really unraveled the whole situation and exactly what's going on now with their planned Snow White cinematic universe after already canceling out 2 prequel movies that were going to focus on the dwarfs and the evil queen. However, there's a lot more to discuss on top of this regarding a Snow White sequel and more. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support, and let's get right into the subject, shall we? Now, as of this moment, there is a big plan and strategy that's being put into place by Bob Iger and the board to essentially gender swap the 7 dwarfs, or as they call them, the magical creatures in the 2024 film, apparently. And they're doing this based on some very unknown source material to justify their actions on moving ahead with all of this. We're going to explain every single aspect of this. Now, we know that everything happening with Snow White right now is that they do have a cancellation plan in play if the Snow White trailer does not deliver, regardless of them trying to hide things and specific aspects of the 7 magical creatures, as they call them. And on top of this, there's still a Snow White sequel still in active development, much like how they're trying to develop a Little Mermaid sequel, regardless of their box office expectations. Well, not meeting expectations, right? So, moving on to the next major thing here is this. With Disney dealing with the ongoing issues related to Snow White 24 since the leaked photographs surfaced. However, right now, one significant development between Bob Iger and the board is their current plan for a sequel to Snow White 24 that is still moving forward, regardless of canceling those 2 prequel movies. Right now, the current plan for the Snow White sequel is to remove the 7 dwarfs, or the magical creatures, as you see them in the leaked photos that fans saw in those actual pictures from the planned sequel, entirely by introducing now a series of new characters called the dwarfellas, which would be an all-female variant of the 7 dwarfs. This is said to be modeled after the 1980 film called Happily Ever After, that Disney will be adopting ideas from 20th Century Studios to enhance the story further. The new villain planned for the sequel of Snow White 24 is after the Queen's demise, is her very own brother called Lord Malice, who holds the power to turn people into stone by draping his cape over individuals. This is planned to be the next villain for Snow White in the sequel. Disney's plan is to adopt those elements from the dark and gritty Happily Ever After film from 1989 into the Snow White 24 sequel that they are now moving forward with. Now guys, let me pause here quick because there's a lot more to talk about than this. The thing that they're doing right now to justify their reasoning behind getting rid of the magical creatures or the 7 dwarfs, I'm getting quite honestly, it gets a little tiresome, the fact that they are calling it that, but based on those leaked photographs, that's what they're going to appear as, both from what we saw and what's been happening behind closed doors. Now, Disney is planning to remove them entirely because of the backlash, and as a way to justify a way to gender swap them and to create a female or an all-female-led variant of the 7 dwarfs, calling them the dwarfellas. But here's where things get even all the more hypocritical, is that Disney holds no plans of adjusting their height. They want to keep them as tall people in the Snow White sequel, which really makes no sense because it sounds like they're just adopting the ideas of the dwarfellas, but they're not going to call them the dwarfellas in Snow White 24's sequel. And honestly, I really don't see a sequel ever coming to light if this is going to fail that bad. If it's going to be like one of the worst movies of all time in Disney history, how in the world could they move ahead with a sequel? It just can't happen. It's similar to what happened with Indiana Jones 5. We had people like Kathleen Kennedy and Phoebe Waller-Bridge endlessly saying the same thing. Yeah, there's a sequel in development. We're taking baby steps, and it's still in development right now, by the way, guys. But as you all know, in development really means nothing. It means that they're discussing ideas, they're brainstorming how to get the movie done, what the plot's going to be like. They're not necessarily writing a script. But this is the general outline right now for the sequel, is to essentially swap the 7 dwarfs and introduce these new characters called the dwarfellas, which are going to have powers, much like in that Happily Ever After 1989 film. If you guys have never seen that film, you may actually have seen it. It might be very well deep embedded in your subconscious, where you do actually remember it, but you just haven't thought about it in decades. So, interestingly enough, things progress here, and though a sequel is still greenlit, the plan is to double down on removing the 7 dwarfs and to introduce these new all-female lead characters, or cast of characters called the dwarfellas. This is said to be the Disney's board decision on gender swapping those 7 character variants, who are now, of course, the magical creatures. What's hypocritical, however, is the dwarfellas, once again, like the magical creatures in the leaked photographs of Snow White 24, are planned to not be short in any nature and will be normal people or of tall size. Disney feels this time they can get away with this since it will be based on a far lesser known iteration of a Snow White story with the dwarfellas and Lord Malice as the evil queen's brother as the main villain. This is also contradictory since they are trying to hide the 7 magical creatures from the upcoming marketing plan for Snow White 2024. Now, as far as release date goes, we know that they want to get a sequel out around 3 years after every single of these live-action remakes. The same exact thing pretty much goes as follows for The Lion King, which was introduced back in 2019. You know, you had 2021 and 22, and then going throughout 23, they went a little overboard there because they had some delays, mind you, but the original plan was 3 years. After every live-action adaptation, it will have a sequel. Same exact thing applies for Little Mermaid, as does for Snow White 2024, currently where it stands now. So that means you might see, for example, a Little Mermaid sequel by late 2026, maybe, at the maximum. So what's interesting about this, though, is the fact that they're looking at source material that is so unknown to almost everybody, and they're using that as a way to justify their way of swapping the 7 dwarfs. Not that we should overly care, to be honest, because what we see in the upcoming 24 film, it's not like the original characters in any way by design, so it really makes no difference, and this just goes to show you how out of place and unorganized Disney's way of thinking really is. I mean, they just want to double down and up the ante on agendas and diversity, this and all these different things that are just pure nonsense. Just for the sake of doing it, it strips away from the story. And look, we already know that Halle Bailey has commented on the Little Mermaid sequel that they're looking to adapt the actual sequel into live action as well, where they have a kid. They are looking to do that. That's another thing happening right now. So there's a lot of things that Disney is just doing that's not needed. But overall, guys, drop a comment below. Fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. And I will catch you guys next time.